We love being booked and busy, but who are you when you're just still and silent? Welcome back to the Becoming Podcast, Faithful and Unfinished. Last episode, we talked about what happens after that nudge, and we talked about staying faithful in the quiet spaces. And today, we're going to talk a little bit more about when the quiet surfaces, especially when it comes to our identity, worth, and who we believe we are when nothing is happening. This is the continuation of that in between period. I think the best example of this, like in between in this quiet space, is kind of like being in the waiting room before giving birth. We don't know what to expect. There's a lot of tension. We have to be still and quiet, and like we're just waiting for like our name to be called. This is the time where we're checking our email, waiting for something to come through, waiting for a piece of news, waiting for a next step direction, waiting to figure anything out, which can often feel like, okay, seriously, what is happening? But what happens when this waiting period ends up being longer than you anticipated? How do you stay faithful in those times? And what do you actually do in these times? And normally I introduce a scripture like way later on down the road, but we are going to start heavy and strong because this is a scripture verse that I have had to live through several times in my life. And it always comes in a season of hearing a nudge, obeying, and then being in this season. So let me grab my Bible real quick. I'm surprised it's not worn out, but we're going to find it really quick. I can tell you that. So we're looking at Psalm 46:10. So if you know what this verse is, you know what I'm about to say. Fortunately, I used to hate this process. Now I've like embraced it and I'm good with it because I've seen the fruit that comes from this season. Okay. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation, and I will be honored throughout the world. Psalm 46:10, the first time that I had this verse like come to life was after my divorce and going through the healing journey. And so for me during that period was a big reset in my identity. Previous to that time period, I absolutely hated myself. I had gotten out of an abusive marriage, but the reason I ended up choosing that marriage was because for the first time in my life when I met my ex-husband, he was the first man to tell me that I was beautiful, and I honestly thought that that was the goal in life. I thought the goal was for a man to find you, think you're beautiful, and that's really all that counted, that I discounted how he actually treated me. And I was operating out of a complete deficit because I was seeking external validation rather than seeing who I really was and setting my standards based on what my value was, right? And after getting out of that was that deep healing period. And one of the biggest pieces during that time was God doing a work on me solidifying or even like finding an identity. Because before it was all about striving, perfection, getting good grades, making money, being successful, but finding love and being told that I was beautiful. And it required very deep work to actually be still and sit with who I was. Who did I desire to be? Who did God see that I was? And who did God desire for me to be? Or rather, who did he make me to be? Who did he design me to be? So if I look back during that time, I actually remember going to therapy before I was married, and there were several things that happened. I found him cheating multiple times. He had a pornography addiction. He was abusive. He was controlling. He was abusive emotionally, physically, sexually, financially, every possible way. He didn't beat me, but I dismiss that as because he didn't physically beat me that way, that it was okay and to keep moving forward. And because I had never really been in a relationship because I was the insecure big girl, I thought that how he treated me was normal, which it was not. It was very much the opposite. I didn't really want to go there, but we're going there. I grew up as a pastor's kid, and remaining pure and celibate was something that was very important to me. And I remember because of how I saw myself and how much I didn't value myself, and I thought that I constantly had to be giving more of myself in order to be approved and to be loved, I made the decision to have sex with him. And I remember that night, it was Halloween, and I remember going to Shoppers Drug Mart, buying condoms. Oh man, just even thinking about it is like a whole nother life ago. And I remember that night, my mom wasn't home. We had sex. He broke the condom. And I remember later on that night, he joked and told me that he couldn't believe my virginity cost him only $8. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, that's how much the box of condoms were. And I remember feeling so small, insignificant, and like a worthless piece of nothing. And that sat with me for so long, and I carried that shame so heavily, and that was the reason that I kept staying in the relationship even when I would find out he was cheating. He was on dating profiles. I found his dating profiles. How he talked to me, he was super controlling. He didn't want me around my friends and my family. But because of that decision I made that night, I operated out of that place of not seeing my value, not seeing my worth, and I was left as a shell. I gained a ton of weight during that process being with him. I lost all of who I was. I was actually in school to be a youth pastor. I had gone back to school part-time while I was working full-time, because I wanted to be a youth pastor. I was an assistant youth pastor at the church that I was attending. Meanwhile, this is what was going on in my life, and it was now looking back, I can see God had destiny for me, and it was like the enemy saw where I was going, and I thought that this man was gonna be amazing because he was a pastor's son. It was like some of the things that I desired. And the first day that I met him, he told me I was beautiful, and he thought that I was the one and that he was gonna marry me, and, like, why I didn't go running then, I don't know. But again, my identity was founded in something that wasn't true. It was false, and it was insecure. And I was just coming out of my parents' own divorce and all of that, going through that around 21, and so I wasn't in a great space when I met him. And looking back, after getting out of that situation, when I finally realized we got married, and literally every single person who came to my wedding said, "Are you sure this is who you wanna be with?" Because they saw how he treated me, they saw how he was with me, they saw that he was unfaithful multiple times, that he was controlling, he didn't want me around friends and family, he isolated me, all of those pieces. And I literally remember one day waking up and thinking, "I cannot live another day in this pain." And so that was the day that I told him when he came home from work, I made him dinner and I served him dinner because that's what he's expected. And I said to him, "This isn't working and I can't do this anymore. So either you have to go or we need to work on it." And so he left that night. And he, like, did not talk to me for months. He went and got all his own banking. He also started dating right away. He may have already been dating before we actually split as well, because think that was my last straw. I found out that he was talking to women online, and I remember asking him the night before I made this decision, I remember saying to him, "Are you happy?" And he was like, "Of course I'm happy. I love being with you. I love being your husband, blah, 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 blah." And that for me, I was like, "You're lying." And it was like my final straw. So, anyways, when he left, I was forced into this place of stillness and quiet. And my friends were like, "Sarah, are you going to speak?" I literally did not speak for like 3 months. I had nothing to say. I think I was trying to carry everything and show everybody that I was okay, things were good. I was trying to prove everyone wrong because here I was, I made this decision to marry this man. I believed in marriage, all while knowing all of these things. And I was so ashamed. And that shame kept me stuck in this identity that was not for me and it was not of God and it was not who God designed me to be either. And so I was in this place of being still and being quiet, not recognizing it. I was doing everything I could during that time to heal. I was reading my Bible, I was praying, I was journaling, I was striving. And so after getting out of it, I remembered I had seen a therapist and he told me after knowing all of this stuff, "Don't ever speak to this man." This was during a time that we had broken up. "Do not speak to this man. Do not ever get back together with this man. He is dangerous." And for some reason, I still didn't even listen to that, let alone all the other people in my life, all my friends, all my family. And I look back now and I'm like, how did my friends and my family stay there for me? I'm so grateful for my circle because if it wasn't for that, I don't know where I would have been, to be honest. But that was so uncomfortable to then be in this stillness and this quiet. And again, if I look back at, so that was just before I turned 30 and just before I turned 40, I went through this whole process again of having to be still and get out of a situation that wasn't serving me and that wasn't for me and be in this place of being still. So, like, now I'm starting to see trends of what happens when you have a nudge, you make the decision, you have to be still and surrender. And, like, what do you do in this stillness time? And what is the purpose of this stillness time? I truly believe that part of it is to refine or rather dismantle the identity that you've built that caused you to operate in the places that you were operating and make decisions that you were making that did not actually serve you. And so, so much of this deep work in being still and knowing that He is God and that you are not God and that you cannot control things is to reassess, who am I? Who do I desire to be? So that you can transform. Again, that whole process of the butterfly effect of being in a cocoon, that being still, nobody sees what's going on in the quiet place. so that you can emerge into that beautiful butterfly. And that space can feel really uncomfortable, especially if you're not used to being still and taking a beat. And I don't know about you, but oftentimes in this stillness place, I'm like angry and resentful. Like when it first starts, I'm like, seriously, am I learning this lesson again? That's kind of how I felt in as I was approaching 40. I was like, seriously, did I really have to learn this lesson again? Clearly I did. And that's why I even go walking into a new season now, I'm very careful about what I commit to, making sure I have boundaries because I'm like, I don't want to learn this lesson again. I would like to walk in this new identity. And I think when I transitioned from 30 after my divorce and walking into what I was doing before modeling, speaking, becoming a personal trainer, all of those things, so much of it was around my body. I was so insecure about what I looked like that everything was, I'm not worth anything because I'm the big girl. I'm too fat, I'm too ugly, all of those things. And so the biggest work I actually had to do was to transform from going from that dialogue to who I am and the qualities that I possess and actually taking the focus off my body. But I think because there was still work that wasn't fully done, I still operated so much in like the body acceptance piece. And so I relied heavily on that because I still thought so much of my value and worth was in relation to my body. And I think that that's the deep work that this round did for me. And going through a breakup and rebuilding a second time was the detachment from my body and not focusing on it. So when I think about the things that I did after my divorce, late 20s, early 30s, it was a lot of reprogramming of just worthiness, who I am, that kind of thing, reframing, re-recording the negative tape that played in my head. So affirmations were a really, really important piece for me of I would literally it started with having to stop thoughts. I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm not worth it, I'm not enough. Those pieces, I would have to stop them dead in their tracks. And then the next piece was to replace them with truth. I am beautiful, I am strong, I am courageous, etc. To re-record that negative tape. And for me, this round, because I spent so many years talking about body on social media, body positivity, and then I dropped that because it felt like it became very toxic and it still wasn't fully aligned with like what I actually desired and believed. To now doing this again through another filter has been, who does God say I am? Who do I desire to be and what do I want life to look like? That has nothing to do with my body. So it's going to be very rare that you hear me talk anymore about being confident in your body and all of those things because I recognize that that's still a little bit too shallow for where I would like to be because there is so much more to us than just our body and this outward vessel that we walk around in every single day. With that said, it is also still very important to take care of our bodies. But how I see things now is we are a whole unit, which includes our body, our soul, our spirit. It's n We can't just focus on one because if we just focus on one, the rest aren't gonna be in balance, and it's like juggling and a ball dropping, right? We need to be juggling all 3 at the same time, and it can be really hard to go from, like, not focusing on any of them to focusing on all of them, which is where that in-between stage and this being still is how do you find that balance and that juggling? And what I have found really, really helpful is to focus on little things we can do in our day-to-day habits to help keep those in balance. So for me, that means starting my day with my devotions. So reading my Bible in the morning before I start my day, setting the tone for my day, that being the foundation. It's also making sure I take care of my body. So for me, that's working out regularly, it's walking, it's also sleeping and nourishing my body, making sure I'm hydrated, all of those things. And then it's also like relationships. Who's in my circle? Who do I spend time with? What am I doing in those capacities as well? And taking care of myself in the other places of life as well. And oftentimes in this being still phase, we're just focusing on those little things and it reminds me of there's a passage in the Bible that talks about an owner giving his servants talents. And so, what are we going to do with the talents and the things that God gives us? Are we going to bury it so nothing happens to it? Are we going to invest in it? Are we going to be bold with that? Are we, you know what I mean? Like, and when God gives us something small, he needs to be able to he needs to be able to trust us with the something small so he can give us something greater. And so, in this time of being still, I kind of see it like laying your foundation. Who are you when nobody is watching you? Can you be consistent? Can you show up for yourself? Can you spend time with God? Can you have those difficult conversations? Can you cry out to him when it's really, really rough? Or what are you relying on a coping mechanism? So I know for me, when I was relying on coping mechanisms, I remember after my divorce, I was like going out all the time. I was partying, I was drinking because I was trying to fill something. But it was actually doing more damage than good. Again, creating those false narratives of like who thought I was attractive when I would go out, making sure that I was impressing people and working for it. But like, where is that going to get me or you? Nowhere. And so this time of being still is such an important piece, and taking it seriously is really, really important because it will help you redefine who you are, build your identity on a strong foundation so that you can operate how you were actually designed to operate, not out of a deficit, not out of insecurity, not out of fear. Those are very powerful feelings to operate out of, and we need to be able to dismantle the pieces of our identity that are not serving us so that we can rebuild them with the things that do. I think another thing that's difficult in this time, to be honest, is dismantling what I do is who I am. And that is a lie. And so I believed so heavily I am a plus size model, personal trainer, body positive advocate, author, all of these labels. So much of it was about my identity and wanting to feel validated. And that if I wasn't doing these things or operating in these things, then I was nobody. And we know that that's a lie. And so in this time as well, it's detaching those labels that we've either created for ourselves or have been put on us and realizing I am not what I do. They're parts of me and they help make up who I am, but they are not who I am. And I think that that's a really hard gap to go to and accept. And when we can accept it, we can start operating in a different manner as well. We show up differently for ourselves, in our relationships, in our career, in every area of life. And I think that that's the other thing is like when we think of healing journeys or being in the between, we think of the right now. And we think of, "Oh, it's just gonna help me feel okay." No, there's so much more to it. Like, when we focus on being the best versions of ourselves and living in our true identity, it literally affects every single area of our life. It affects how we show up in every relationship with ourselves and others. It shows up how we are at work. Are you too depleted to even show up properly at work? All of those things, right? Like, showing up for our kids, showing up for our friends. If we're too depleted and we're not operating in our full identity and we're operating out of insecurity, for example, who you're going to be around is obviously going to be impacted. And then how you operate around them is also going to be impacted, right? So it's just taking that pause of I'm not who I'm not what I do. And for me, that was a really, really big shift because I focused so much on my value being what I did, what I achieved, and how I could prove to people to love me because of the things I could do for them. Such a messed up place to be, not gonna lie. So I think also in this time period, if we think of when photos are developed like the old school way, it's in a dark room, right? It's in a dark, cool place. It has to be stable place for the photos to develop properly before they're exposed to light. And that space can feel really dark, like a dark room when we're in this being still, in this becoming stage, in the middle. It can feel really dark and isolated. And I think it's just trusting that in this stage, realizing that it's necessary for it to come to full light and to trust that God has you in the palm of his hand and that he's with you through this process. We can rest in that being still, knowing that he's guiding the way. So if you're in this waiting season and you're in this being still, I know it can feel uncomfortable, but just know this isn't a time to rush through. This is a time to embrace. And I think the other thing too is remembering that everybody's journey is going to be different. For me, this last season of my life of being still and being quiet has been 2+ years. For some people, it's much shorter. And we can't compare our journey to others. We have no idea what God fully has in store for us. And that's part of this discovery is like what God has for us, what his desires are, having his desires become our desires to give us the desires of our heart. So I think it's recognizing that just because it took me 2.5 years, I hope it's not 2.5 years for you. And I'm also still discovering and still going through it, right? And I think, again, it's that whole releasing the expectation in this becoming period because we're always going to be becoming. We're always going to be becoming a newer version of ourselves. We're going to be in different seasons of life. You're going to ebb and you're going to flow. And letting go of it during this time is really, really important so that you're not like being dragged by it. You're letting go and just trusting that in the right time, God will bring things to fruition. He'll bring people into your life at the right time. He'll transition things at the right time. And the worst thing that we can do is try and rush the process and try and force God's hand because it's only going to backfire. I've watched it time and time again when I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to do it. And then I go through it and then it's like, that did not land. And then you have to deal with that as well. And it almost like sets you back in a delay. And so I think when we can just like literally just be still, know that He is God and trust that He is going to guide the way, it can really set us into a place of just trust and peace rather than that like restraint. I'm actually going to read another scripture that just came to mind too, Proverbs 3:5-6. I feel like it's kind of like a follow up to Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I'm God. Proverbs 3:5-6. This is actually like one of my grandma's favorite verses. Because I think one of the things that I struggled with is, God, am I not hearing you? Did I hear wrong while I'm in this waiting season? Because sometimes it can feel longer than we wanted it to. Um, but it's trusting that He knows the plan and He's got us. So Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek His will in all you do, and He will show you which path to take. And I think remembering that if we trust Him in this season of being still and being quiet, we are surrendering to our own understanding. We're giving up our own understanding. We're relying on His understanding and Him knowing the way rather than us having to figure it out. And in this time, it is so important to seek His will, and being still and being quiet is a great time to do that. You have the time to spend with Him, talk to Him, tell Him how you're feeling, and seek His face and seek His presence. And I think oftentimes, just like we're so used to producing, we're also so used to just seeking God for what we need as opposed to seeking His face, being in relationship with Him, just spending time with Him. It's like with friendships, for example, or a romantic partner. You're spending time with them. You like being in their presence. You like doing stuff with them. It's the same thing with God. And oftentimes we make it so complicated that it has to look like this and I have to read my devotions like this. And there's a time for reading your Bible and allowing the word that is live and living and active to penetrate your heart and your soul. But then there's also that time of just being in His presence and listening and seeing what He has to say to you, um, and being in that space. And so I think oftentimes, again, with our culture, it's so normal normal to I have to do this, and this is what it looks like when it comes to our relationship with God. Sometimes we just need to be. So being still, being in His presence and allowing that to soak through you and allow you to become all that He's created you to be. And then it's also like it's a promise that He's given us that He will show you what path to take. And so if we can stop fighting this being still and this being quiet and trust that He's going to show us what steps to take, He will. I've watched Him do it over and over again in my life, in other people's lives in my life of trusting Him and also just feeling safe enough to trust because I know in this world a lot of us have been hurt and it's hard to trust, but we can trust Him fully, wholly, wholeheartedly. And this is a beautiful time to practice that trust and to just be in His presence. So I want you to remember, if you are in this season of being still, if you're in this quiet space, I want you to remember that this is a process. You are not falling behind. You are actually being built, like from the ground up, like condo buildings in Toronto. For example, they dig deep, 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 deep down to build the foundation so that that tall building can actually stand to be a skyscraper, for example. But it starts way down deep, and we don't often see it come off the ground until a year down the road because that foundation has to be built, just like you need to be built, just like I need to be built. We have to have a strong foundation to withstand all that God has for us, and so that we don't sway in the wind, so that we don't topple over, so that we can stand straight and we can walk forward in all that He's called for us in each of our lives. And each of our callings are so different. Some are quiet purposes, some are in the everyday. Some part of my purpose is being a mom to Brooklyn and showing up for her and showing her how to do things and teach her in the ways of God and grow into the beautiful little girl she is and eventually young woman. That's part of my purpose. Part of my purpose is also this podcast and being able to share the things that God has taught me in hopes that it helps you on your journey. There are so many pieces to who we are as women and as individuals, and there's so much to our purpose as well. But if it's not built on something that's strong and foundational, which often comes in the quiet, unseen, dark places, we aren't going to be able to be that tall skyscraper that will provide shelter and warmth for other people. We won't be able to do that. And so take this time, allow yourself to be okay with the rest and the being still and the unknown. It's okay to not know, but just know that he knows and he is going to guide your steps. You can trust him in this process and you're not behind, even though it might feel like it. A few things I want to leave with you as we wrap up that I think are keys to kind of like wrap up these feelings of stillness and quietness is that stillness is not absence of action. It's actually a transfer of control. So release the control. It is okay. You are going to be okay. And in this time, God is not taking your identity from you in this season. He's untangling it from the performance that you're used to. Oof. I know that is a hard one because many of us are just so used to performing. So let this time of stillness teach you who you are without output, without producing something. And let your identity settle just a little bit, just like the ground settles, before you start your next assignment, before you take the next step. Honor this time so that you can be all that you desire and were called to be. And I want you to give yourself permission to exist without explaining yourself. I know how hard that can be in this last year of just like rest. I couldn't explain myself to people. I couldn't say what was going on. I couldn't talk about all the healing things that were going on. I couldn't talk about all the times God was teaching me things. I had to stop. I just had to stop. This season isn't meant to erase you. It's actually grounding you for what's next. So take joy and peace in that, knowing that there is something next. Your journey is not over. You still have purpose. You have lung in your lungs. So if this quiet time has been messing with your sense of self, you are not alone. I can tell you that. Sometimes God just stills everything that's around us, including us, so that we can finally know who we are in him. So stay here. Sit here. This part of the process really does matter. You are worthy simply because you exist, not because you produced something today.